all of that, it's time to look at today's headlines with Nick Ferarri and Ashley James.
Morning, Nick.
Morning. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Very well.
Good stuff. Let's start with President Trump. He's been out and about. Health officials in the UK have reassured pregnant women that it's safe to take paracetamol after President Trump claimed that it could be linked to an increased risk of autism. Here's what he had to say.
Tylenol during pregnancy can be associated with a very increased risk of autism. So taking Tylenol is not good. Don't take it if you just can't. I mean, it's fight like hell not to take it. There may be a point where you have to, and that you have to work out with yourself. So don't take Tylenol.
Ashley, you're shaking your head. I know when I was pregnant, it was OK to take it if you
It still is OK to take it,
Correct.
Just to be very clear. So first of all, I feel this on a personal level as a woman who has gone through pregnancy and childbirth and who was also... I had a really bad pelvic girdle pain during my first pregnancy with Alfie, and paracetamol is the only safe thing that we can take. And the pain that so many of us go through, whether that's from sickness to other ailments like pelvic girdle pain, he actually said, and I quote, that women should tough it out. And it's just so insulting that it's putting the shame and guilt onto mothers, onto expectant mothers, that if we really need to take it, if we can't tough it out, if we're not strong enough, then we're going to have to take this thing that could, which it doesn't, but could result in autism. And so secondly, I'd like to make this point, especially as my son is, going through his assessments, that autism and neurodivergence in general, it's not a disease, it's not something to be ashamed of. My son potentially doesn't see the world the way others do, but he sees, the way he sees the world is so beautiful, and it can be such a superpower. We've seen with Sam Thompson, ADHD, different form of neurodiversity. There is nothing wrong with being neurodiverse, and I really resent this insinuation that it's some form of disease. It also goes against the science, which I'm going to let Dr. Zoe get onto, but I'm honestly, sick of male politicians trying to control or influence women's health. This isn't backed by science, and it's especially frustrating coming from someone like Donald Trump's mouth when he's done so much to limit abortion access, even when the woman or baby's life is at risk. So now that he's suddenly pretending to care about pregnant women or children, he went on to say something about these beautiful babies being injected, insinuating that vaccines are bad. And I'd just like to highlight that the #1 cause of child death in America is firearms, and the #1 cause of death of pregnant women is male violence in the US. So I just wish that these male politicians would let science do the talking and stop, same as when he said that people should inject bleach during COVID,
bleach, wasn't it?
or whatever it was. It's just nonsensical, and the fact that we're even having to discuss it now when it's just baseless claims, and it allows other people to have a debate, and there is no debate. And I'm sick of, there'll be pregnant women currently watching around the world, because this will make global news, who are now going to blame themselves if they need to take pain relief. And that shame, by the way, there is a gender pain gap anyway, but that shame continues into childbirth.
We'll come to Nick in just a moment.
Yes.
Let's get the medical perspective on this, Zoe, because I would imagine your heart dropped when you heard this.
Oh, gosh. I think it's just a real stark reminder that the messenger is just as important as the message. And, I look to the Royal Colleges, the professors, the scientists who I respect, who are at the top of their game, and across the board, they completely disagree with what Donald Trump is saying. There is no evidence that paracetamol, called Tylenol in the US, is dangerous, and there is no evidence that it causes autism. There are other painkillers that are less safe, so it's really worrying. This kind of misinformation is dangerous because women who are already in a vulnerable position may be inclined to take other painkillers that are not as safe, or not treat their fever or not treat their pain, which in itself is not without risk. And yeah, the third thing I wanted to say is just completely to agree with Ashley that autism is not a disease. There's no epidemic. We've always had people with autism, we always will, and we do not need a cure. What we need is a world that accepts and respects and support people, whatever their neurotype. So, yeah, I agree. Again, it's a world where we're seeing men messing up healthcare for women, attributing blame to women. Paracetamol is a safe painkiller as long as it's taken as per instructions. So people out there who are pregnant, if you need to take paracetamol, you can.
Thank you, Zoe. So, look, Nick, that's actual bona fide medical advice regarding this. So we come back to Trump and why he would say it and why he would create the furore that he said that he has.
I'm neither a doctor nor am I a politician, but Ben, Kat, you know, if I'd made those sort of claims on LBC this morning, if you'd made claims like that on this morning, we would be sanctioned straight away. There would quite rightly be an Ofcom ruling against us because it's utterly unfounded. There's something called causation and association. You could say the same that every woman who brushes her teeth possibly goes on to have an autistic child. That is an association, it's not a causation, and that's what Trump hasn't seemed to have totally ignored. And the most important research at all is from Sweden, conducted very recently, where they spoke to 2.4 million, well, they looked at 2.4 million children born in Sweden over a 20-year period, many of whom were autistic in some way, shape or form. Some of their mothers had used Tylenol or paracetamol, some of their mothers hadn't. And this Swedish institute, it is the most definitive landmark pieces. There is no association. Remember, we talk about causation and association. There is no association of the risk of using Tylenol / paracetamol with autism. It is, people talk about, Ben, Trump derangement syndrome, i.e. the minute you hear the name Donald Trump, you automatically think I'm wrong. I want to spin it round. The derangement in this instance, and I don't always oppose what Trump says, I try and look at it rationally, but this is deranged, and it's both dangerous and deranged and should simply be ignored. But the media is doing an important job, and I had people ring into my show today. Why are you talking about this? Why? Because we need to get the message out to young women or women of any age who might have had a child with autism. It is nothing to do with the fact that you took a paracetamol when you weren't feeling very well. It is nothing to do with that with whatsoever, and just file it where it belongs, in the garbage.
Why has he said it?
He has said it. I think sometimes he doesn't realise what he says. There is something to what Ashley is saying there, in that there is a sense within a ring of the Republican Party that they are trying to roll back women's rights, women's health. I don't think it's wholly that, but I think that is, again, a causation, if you will, to use that expression. But what damages him, and unfortunately the equivalent of what we call our Secretary of State of Health, Robert Kennedy, he's not a great, there we are, I see him on the President's right, yes, I think. He's not a great help here because he is, he's a subscriber to some fairly strange views as regards healthcare, so you'll have support from that. What you need, as we've seen so many times, not always, but so many times, there doesn't seem to be someone who can say, Mr. President, I think you're wrong. All the president's men in this case really are all the president's men. They just nod. And they are all men.
Well, let's leave that there then, because I think the definitive response from Dr. Zoe and from the medical experts is there is no link, which is hugely the most important message for all of it. Let's move on to second story, Ashley. Another one that I'm sure you'll be very passionate about. There's a new survey from Girl Guiding. I know you're ambassador for the Girl Guides. A third of girls and young women avoided taking public transport alone for fear of safety issues.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, pretty damning, isn't it, of where we are in a society. And one of the reasons that I am a Girl Guiding ambassador is because I think it's really important that we hear directly from girls. So many times as adults, we try to assume what young people, not just girls, but girls and boys are going through, whereas Girl Guiding speak directly to young women and girls. And this shows that more than half don't feel on more than half of girls don't feel safe on public transport, and a third of them avoid it altogether. And I think this just highlights what we already know, that, you know, Yvette Cooper said it a few years ago, violence against women and girls is endemic. And this is part structural because, you know, we know that there's less staff present now on public transport than there used to be. But also we're looking at a society where we're still not addressing the root cause of the problem, which is male violence, which is, you know, the fact that we're not tackling the manosphere. So young boys and men are still being radicalised by these male mouthpieces who are sexist and misogynistic. And we're also seeing abusers being given early release. So to me, that isn't assuring. I'm nearer 40 than I am to my teenage years, or even to my 20s, and I don't feel safe walking around at night. I don't feel safe on public transport, and I don't see anyone around, especially on platforms, that would reassure me. And I think, when people have daughters especially, they all say, oh, we're going to have to lock her up, or, they don't trust anyone around their daughters. But this, why can't we admit, without having daughters, that this is a real problem? So Girl Guiding is basically, off the back of this research, calling on local authorities and schools to publish plans aimed at tackling misogyny in the community, and obviously for politicians who are in charge of public transport to engage with girls on their fears, to acknowledge their fears and actually do something about it to make services safer.
And Nick, there's some really chilling statistics in this report. 56% of girls and young women say they don't feel safe on public transport on their own. 45% it was in 2022. That's gone up significantly since then. 31% say they will avoid it altogether.
Yeah, and one last number, 10% of girls say they deliberately miss school. So to Ashley's point, I'm sure we do need an education programme for men and for young men. But more practically, look, I manage to go to theatres and things like that sometimes, and I come back to a suburban railway station in London sometimes, and there is, and I'm a fairly big bloke, not a particularly easy pushover, I would hope, but there are no staff there whatsoever, which I find quite incredible. It's 10:30, it's 11 o'clock at night, it's obviously going to be dark. Whether it's summer or winter, it's going to be dark. Fortunately, quite a lot of people get off at the station that I use, but there will be others further down the line where the idea, I don't have a daughter, but a daughter or my wife, getting off would just give me positive fear. It's not good enough. We need, I don't care what it costs. We need staff in these stations. They attract, in some instances, not all, they attract the wrong sort of people because it's seen as an easy mark to nick a mobile phone, to nick a wallet, to nick a watch, or whatever it might be. We need to address this with an education programme, but as Ashley, I think, would concede, that's going to take some years to kick in. That's not going to happen tomorrow. But what we could have in place within a matter of months or certainly a year is more staff. And if it costs more, I think most people would have an extra 5p on their fare to pay for security.
But I also think we just need to start acknowledging what the problem is, because I feel like we make all these excuses, even calling it violence against women and girls. Who is doing the violence? And so I think until we actually address that there is a male violence problem, things are never going to change.
It's also, though, the lack of action when an event does take place. I've had a friend of mine who was assaulted on a bus and went downstairs and spoke to the driver about it, and nothing was done. He shrugged his shoulders and said,
the same thing.
What do you expect me to do?
I do think, since I was harassed or assaulted on the London Underground, and I do think that Sadiq Khan and his team have done great steps to kind of bring campaigns in place that staff are now much better equipped. But as we can see from this, more needs to be done, and this is up and down the country.
Thank you. OK, is it the end of bar culture?
Don't say that to me, Kat Deely. It's the one thing I've got.
But don't you in your bar, don't you line up? Are you a queuer?
So this is a quite worrying story, I think, Nick. If you like a scrum at a bar, if you like a bundle at a bar, and you feel like you have a bit of bar presence, so often you can get your drink before somebody else, this may be leaving, because there's a Wetherspoons pub, the Surrey Docks pub in Rotherhithe, have changed their policy, Nick. No longer can you pile in and bundle at the bar. You have to queue up in an orderly fashion. Now, is this how you like ordering drinks?
No, but I do kind of get it. Let me explain that the thinking is it should be more like when you go to a coffee shop or something like that, or maybe you're at a deli counter and you take a number. That's their thinking behind it. Apparently, it's perhaps guided or directed more, I should say, to younger consumers, younger drinkers, because they don't like the scrum. But, I mean, Ben, I'm a little bit older than you, but it is often a scrum. And if you take I'm thinking now years ago, you take someone out for a first date and you want to be able to walk up and say, I'll have a pint of lager and a gin and tonic. There is a bit of a fight. And Kat, to you, I know you and I, separately, have lived together in the States. The speed with which a New York barman can control or barwoman for that matter, is extraordinary. And people made me say, what's the difference in how bar staff work in a city like New York, where they can have an entire bar, two of them can run an entire bar. It seems beyond the wit of man. So I kind of get what they're doing down in Rotherhithe.
Yeah. I think this is an attack on our core British values, which is, of course, the tut.
Yes.
Because if there is sensible queuing, then there is no possibility for us to tut and
raise an
mutter
eyebrow.
under our breath that we were there first. I'm actually a big fan of the old school system because I actually would get served pretty
quickly. I'm not surprised.
You just slightly lean forward. I
Yes.
feel like maybe this is feminism working its
in the right
magic
way.
because now this is a more equal system. But I feel like it's a
Can
bit
you
unfair to blame
imagine
Gen
if
Z.
if I'd suggested that, to Ashley, I would imagine they should have set the Marines on me, but she's allowed to say she can lean forward. What a
It's
strange
my
world
lived
in which we live.
experience, Nick. It's my lived experience.
My suggestion is to just bring Tom Cruise back.
Yeah.
Throw the glasses around, bring him back.
Tom
he
would
could
sort
get
out
it
the
done.
queues
Yeah.
regardless. Thank you for
Nick was-
visiting our This Morning YouTube channel. We upload tons of new content every single day. So hit the subscribe button, like all the videos, and don't miss out. We'll see you in the morning.